The Earth, a beautiful, resplendent oasis, the miracle of birth and life infinitely magnified, the closest humanity can get to scraping the divine. The machine, brutal, unrelenting, a blasphemous perversion of the elements, a desire for control personified. Can these two diametrically opposed forces truly come together in harmonious understanding? And, more importantly, can it beat Branded in a best of 3? Good afternoon, Jank enthusiasts. I'm MBT, and this is 10-Minute Testing. You asked for it, and you know what they say, the wheel that squeaks for several months straight gets the grease. Presenting Earth Machine.
Here they come, clickety-clack down the track!
So here's the list, and honestly I stole this one whole cloth from Peeps. Hand trap lineup aside, I don't think there's much objectionable about it anyway. As always, I'll give you a background about the archetype, a little bit of a discussion about what I hope the deck can do, and of course, the card by card. But first, this video is sponsored by Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro Deck. Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro Deck is a pack opening website that everyone's using for their progression series, but you might have missed it's also got a deck builder, a card database, and a wealth of strategy articles. I personally use it to post the Chalice Line monthly deck breakdowns. Give it a look at www.ygoprodeck.com. With that, let's ease into Earth Machine. Earth Machine is an archetype of Earth Machines. Powered on pure copium, this collection of the most powerful, earthy, mechanical monsters forms a well-oiled monstrosity capable of decimating even the most devastating Reddit non-meta tournaments. Unfortunately, that's about the extent of this deck's capabilities. While it's got an impressive resource loop and a wealth of diverse removal options, a deck made out of cards that were printed pre-pandemic has an understandably hard time dealing with the reality of modern card design. Its low ceiling and lack of negation means it's not difficult to throw a wrench into the gears of this strategy. Until now! Dimension Force contains an exceptionally silly new archetype of machine-type monsters that resolve this deck's outstanding weakness, the Therions. Their flagship monster, Therion King Regulus, is an omni-negate and just what the doctor ordered for an archetype that literally cannot beat Nibiru under any circumstances whatsoever. Outside of that, the deck is pretty much the same 30 cards that they've been playing for longer than the average Farfa viewer has had object permanence. So with that, let's get into the card by card. First up is Therion's King Regulus. I don't know why King is in quotes here. Maybe it's a ceremonial title, like the Burger King. This allows you to target a Therions or a machine in your graveyard, special this card from your hand, equip that monster to this card, and when your opponent activates a card or effect, you can send a Therions you control or one in your hand to the graveyard to negate it. After that, we've got the Machinas. 3 Machina Metal Cruncher. If you control no face-up cards, you get to normal summon this card for free, and when it's normal or special summoned, you can reveal 3 Earth Machine monsters from your deck and randomly add 1 to your hand. Fortress is fantastic in this list. It's just extra link material because you get a bunch of high-level machines into your hand over the course of the combo, and Machina Citadel is a great payoff for the Machina stuff. It has to be special summoned by a card effect and can target a machine monster you control, destroy both that machine monster and all monsters your opponent controls with attack less than or equal to it. It can summon itself back from the graveyard if a face-up Earth machine monster you control is destroyed by battle or card effect. After that, we've got the Infinitrax 3 Infinitrack Harvester. On normal or special, it adds an Infinitrack from your deck to your hand, and you can target a machine monster you control to add up their levels, and they both become that. 3 Infinitrack Brutal Dozer. You contribute an Earth machine as specialist from your hand, and if it's special summoned, you can special an Infinitrack from your deck. Its effects are negated. And then we've got a Trencher, which is Grave Recursion, and a Tunneler, which is the end result of a long Infinitrack combo that draws you exactly 2 cards. Finally, we've got an Anchor Drill, which on normal or special allows you to special an Earth machine from your hand, and like Harvester, can target a monster you control, add up the levels, and they both become that. We're playing 1 copy of Ancient Gear Box for a Ballista line. It really sucks to draw, but you can actually engineer a scenario in which you do get to trigger it at the end of your turn, even if it ends up in your opener. Super Express Bullet Train is an exceptionally powerful card, just a free summon, a 10-star monster if you have Earth machines on your side of the field, as is Derricrane. These are fantastic both as extension and as a way to get 10s onto the field. For hand traps, we're playing 3 Ash Blossom and Joy Spring and 3 Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion. This could be anything, but these are the 6 that I like here the most. And then 3 Machina Redeployment, 3 Heavy Forward, the Machina and Infinitrack Search Spells, and 3 Forbidden Droplet. We are still on 3 Urgent Schedule main, despite the fact that this deck does want to go first in the dark. It's still exceptionally powerful to summon a level 5 or lower and a level 5 or higher Earth machine from your deck if your opponent controls more monsters than you. We've got a Called by the Grave and 1 Overdrive. No longer a trap control deck. This is the only one of these we're playing. In the extra, we've got Zeus, Juggernaut Liba, Superdora, Gustav Max, Earth Slicer, Enter Blatnir, Dingirsu, River Stormer, Cleafor Genius, Double Anger Knuckle, Ballista, and 3 Goliath. The extra is extremely tight, so only play what you expect to summon. In the side, we've got Driver and 3 copies of Gamma, a Pankratops, Triple Lancia, Triple Droll, HFD, and 3 Cosmic. So with that, let's jump into the games. Our first match is up against Hero, and always good to meet a fellow Coper. Our opener is not particularly good. Drawing Ancient Gearbox severely hampers your ability to pop off, and that Infinite Impermanence isn't helping either, but we still should be able to make something happen. We're going to go Brutal Dozer here and trigger the effect to summon a copy of Trencher from deck. We can overlay these 2 5s to make a copy of River Stormer. We'll River Stormer in order to add a Bullet Train from deck to hand, then we're going to link off for a Goliath, trigger the effect of the Bullet Train, and link summon a copy of Anger Knuckle. We'll fire off the redeployment now, pitching the box, adding 2 cards to hand, and proceeding to end step. And did you know, box doesn't just trigger when you add it from deck to hand, it triggers from grave as well. So we will get an Anchor Drill and pass it back to our opponent. All we have to do here is not die. And as Ferris comes down, I realize that might actually be difficult. They're going to go for increase and then summon from deck a copy of Vion. They'll trigger the effect of the Vion in order to send a copy of Malicious to the graveyard, then fire off the Vion, banishing the Ferris for a polymerization. From here, they're going to make a Cross Crusader and then use the effect of the Cross Crusader to bring back the Malicious, tribute the Malicious for a copy of Denier, then banish the Malicious to summon a Malicious from deck and poly into a DPE. From here, they can activate the graveyard effect of the Denier in order to bring itself back, then to tuck one of these Maliciouses on top of the deck, and then they can extend even further by banishing the Malicious for the Malicious and making Dread Decimator. Now we are going to have to pull the trigger here because this is lethal. We'll go for the Bullet Train, and realizing they're not going to be able to kill us this turn, they will now activate Prosperity. They're going to find off the top. Ooh, was really hoping that that one wouldn't make an appearance. Okay, down comes the Masks Change, and we are going to have to be very, very careful about when we Citadel. Let's just take the damage here. We are not dead, and we should be able to make it on the crackback, but still worrisome. Darklaw is a house against this strategy. We're going to go for the Trencher first and foremost. We're going to bring out the Harvester, trigger the Harvester effect that will trigger the Darklaw, and they hit. Oh, that's misery. Okay, well, we'll go from Goliath into an Anchor Drill, summoning from hand an Ancient Gearbox. We'll make them 8s. Our opponent, sniffing what's about to happen, is going to DPE, popping the DPE. That triggers the Citadel and Graveyard, and from here we should be able to do it. We'll go Brutal Dozer, pitching the Goliath, and then trigger Brutal Dozer to summon a Tunneler. From here we can link off into a Genius, and I bet you didn't know this has an effect. We'll negate the macro effect of the Darklaw, and now we can just combo off. We'll go from Goliath into River Stormer, into Goliath, into River Stormer, into adding a copy of Derricrane to hand, into an Anger Knuckle, which triggers the Derricrane. 2 10s on the field means that we are going to be able to make a really powerful Link monster, but not before we fire off Tunneler to draw a couple of cards first. 2 hand traps is exactly where we want to be. We're going to go for Gustav Max and then trigger the effect of the Derricrane, hitting the back row. Unfortunately, this does trigger our opponent's increase, which means that we aren't going to be able to do lethal this turn, but we will be able to do some damage. We'll go for the Juggernaut Liba. They're going to go increase for increase out of targets, I see. We'll go for the Heavy Forward and then activate the Heavy Forward to put it under the Liba to give it an extra attack. From here, we can just go to the battle phase, clean up the board, and pass back to our opponent with 2 hand traps and a Liba threatening lethal. They'll draw for turn, and even though Vion is one of the best cards they have in rotation, it's probably not enough. They'll go Vion, we will Ash Blossom it. They do have the DPE on field, which trades for the Liba at least, but Anger Knuckle is enough on its own. We'll trigger DPE, we'll trigger Citadel, and they'll concede. While this deck excels at going second, that doesn't mean that it doesn't lose to a lot of the auto-win cards in the format. Speaking of, our second match is up against Fluon Deriz, and though our opener is pretty good, oh, it's not fantastic. We're going to go for the Ash Blossom. They will let it resolve, and you never like to see that, because down comes the Robina, and they're going to go ahead and add an Eaglin to hand. They'll trigger the effect of the Eaglin. They'll use it to get a copy of M-Pen. They'll tribute summon the M-Pen. At least we don't have to contend with a barrier statue this turn. Instead, we're just going to have to contend with it when they choose to fire off the trap card. We draw for turn, and let's begin with the copy of Metal Cruncher. We're going to fire off the Metal Cruncher and find off the top of our deck a copy of Brutal Dozer. We're going to trigger the Brutal Dozer, then trigger the effect in order to summon from deck. They will chain Dreaming Town to get Robina. We're going to summon a Trencher, then Robina will trigger. We're going to go ahead and fire off the Forbidden Droplet now to negate both the Robina, preventing the additional summon, and the M-Pen. So we have 1 turn to figure this out, but this is not enough material to do it. We're going to special summon the Bullet Train and go to battle phase, but all we really get to clear here is the M-Pen. In main phase 2, we can go into a Goliath and then an Ancient Gear Ballista in order to add a box from deck to hand. We'll trigger the box in order to get from deck to hand a Tunneler. We'll go into the Tunneler by tributing this Ballista, then we'll make a Goliath, at which point our opponent will Crow, will Bell, and they'll reveal The set card is called by. All right, sure, whatever. We'll go for the Trencher afterwards. Let's see how far we can go. Let's just make Goliath into Anger Knuckle and pass back to our opponent. We do get to trigger this copy of Bullet Train in end step and get a Brutal Dozer for next turn, but doesn't look like it's going to do much. They'll go from Robina into a Simorg off the top. We'll chain the effect of the Anger Knuckle because pretty soon I imagine M-Pen will be making its way onto the field. They're going to go ahead and get the Barrier Statue of the Stormwinds here, then trigger the effect of the Eaglin and the Simorg, chain blocking, of course, the Eaglin, so they can go for an M-Pen, then trigger the M-Pen, chain blocking it with Robina in order to add it back to hand and grab a map. They're going to normal summon a Barrier Statue of the Stormwinds and then add back that Eaglin to hand before firing off the map and going to the battle phase. They're going to use the effect of M-Pen to banish a Robina so they can chain block later and then get in for a ton of damage. Things are not looking fantastic. We're going to trigger the effect of the Bullet Train at end step to get the box back. We can trigger the box in order to get an Anchor Drill, but that's probably not enough. That does contest the Stormwinds, but we needed to not only contest the Stormwinds, but also beat Ryza, and as they go for the Eaglin once again, so it's time for game 3, and you know what that means, a best of 3 versus meta. Our opponent's playing Cyberse Eldritch, and oh! Looks like they're actually playing the Eldritch half of the deck. That's never where you want to be. We're going to begin with a copy of Infinitrack Harvester. That's going to add a Brutal Dozer to hand. We'll go Infinitrack Goliath, and now we can THERION. The king makes his first appearance. We'll go for a Brutal Dozer and then trigger the effect in order to summon from deck a copy of Trencher, which we can then overlay for a River Stormer. We'll fire off the River Stormer in order to add from deck to hand a Bullet Train, which we can then summon. Afterwards, we'll link off for an Ancient Gear Ballista. That's going to trigger and get a copy of Box from our deck to our hand, and Box will trigger, getting a copy of Tunneler from deck to hand. We are rapidly filling up the graveyard, so we'll go for the Tunneler here, and then link off for a Goliath, triggering the Trencher to bring back the Brutal Dozer, walking into a DD Crow, and our opponent's going to walk into our Called by the Grave. We're not even spending THERION King Regulus on this. We'll bring back Brutal Dozer, go into Anger Knuckle, and then Tunneler, putting back 4 extra deck monsters and 1 main deck monster. The card economy. We'll go ahead and get a copy of Ghost Bell to our hand before firing off a redeployment and a heavy forward. We're going to use River Stormer in Grave to bring itself back. We'll switch it to attack with the heavy forward, and then afterwards we're going to go ahead and fire off the Anger Knuckle, pitching the Citadel to bring it back as well. We'll set 1, trigger the effect of this Bullet Train, and pass back to our opponent. They draw another Lich card. Oh, that's gotta hurt. They're going to go for the Cursed Eldland here to get a copy of Eldritch. They'll activate Eldritch. Fine, I mean, that's completely okay. We'll go for the Ghost Bell as they try to reanimate, and they will Cursed Eldland, send a Wakero, and proceed to the end step. Not looking fantastic. They'll set 2 copies of Scarlet Sanguine. We'll have to contend with that, but that's all we're going to have to contend with. We'll draw for turn. It's a heavy forward. Pretty good. We're going to activate heavy forward to equip it to our copy of River Stormer so we can trigger it without having to do anything else on board. We'll get a Dare Crane and trigger the Infinitrack Harvester to get a Brutal Dozer. We'll go into a Goliath, trigger the Dare Crane here, and then afterwards we can make ourselves a copy of Super Dora. We're going to heavy forward in order to add a Brutal Dozer from deck to hand to use as Fortress material and get in for lethal. Our opponent's going to activate this Scarlet Sanguine. We'll detach from Dora, triggering the Dare Crane in Graveyard, which we can then use to pop the Eldritch. They'll chain Wakero just as a blocker, I suppose. We'll go to battle, trigger the effect of the River Stormer in order to attach the Wakero. They unfortunately have a Conk, so we won't be able to win this turn, but they are in a sore spot, and we have a Zeus. Now, this looks like it's a 1 activation Zeus, but the Goliath in Graveyard will trigger when something is sent to the graveyard, which means it's actually 2. They're going to go for the Eldritch here. We'll bring back the Dare Crane. They're going to summon the Eldritch, proceed to the battle phase, and if you think we won't Zeus our own board, you are sorely mistaken. We'll Zeus and chain Dora so it sticks around, then we'll trigger Goliath to put it under the Zeus, and our opponent will concede. So it's time for game 2, and if every Cyberse Lich hand looked like this, it'd be the best deck. Okay, well, we do have the Lancia, which will cut off their ability to activate Water Enchantress, but that's it. They're going to go for the Cursed Eldland here, adding from deck to hand a copy of Conquistador. Next, down comes Dotscaper into Link Disciple. They're going to summon back the Dotscaper and make a Devotee. Devotee's mandatory effect triggers, and then afterwards they're going to Disciple to tuck a card. They'll Devotee to summon 2 tokens to their side of the field, and then trigger Magician's Souls. They're going to activate Magician's Souls for 2 here, which we can Ash, but man, it's so crazy that even after minusing yourself that much, you are still way ahead on card advantage. They're going to go for Dagda and Devotee, triggering the effect of the Dagda to get a Scythe, a card I do not think we can beat. They'll go for Lingaribo and Verte Anaconda, triggering the Verte Anaconda to send Fusion Destiny and a couple of heroes to go into DPE. They'll pass back to us, and this is going to be an uphill battle. We'll fire off a Machina redeployment, they'll Ash it, and okay, no reason to sit around in this one any longer. So it's time for that all-important game 3, and oh, wow. That is pretty much everything we could have ever asked for. Okay, let's see if we can make it work. We're going to begin with a copy of Machina Redeployment, and we already have access to the Brutal Dozer by way of the Heavy Forward, so we're actually going to use this Metal Cruncher to add a Therion King Regulus. We'll go for the Heavy Forward afterwards. We're going to use the effect of the Brutal Dozer, tributing the Metal Cruncher and triggering the effect in order to summon a Trencher. And now that we have a machine in the graveyard, it's Therion time. We'll equip the Metal Cruncher to the Therion King Regulus, and then do the exact same combo as last time. River Stormer for a Speeding Express Bullet Train, into Goliath, into Ballista, trigger Ballista to get a box from deck, and box in order to get a Tunneler. From here, we can tribute our Ballista for the Tunneler, and then afterwards go for the Trencher in Graveyard to bring back the Brutal Dozer. That eats a DD Crow, but I figure this is as good a time as any to fire off the Therion. We're going to negate our opponent's monster's effect, bring back the Brutal Dozer, make a Goliath, make a double-headed Anger Knuckle, and draw a couple of cards. We're going to put back all of these Goliaths and the Ballista, drawing 2 and finding... oh god, that's like the 2 best draws in our deck, Lancia and Derricrane. We'll summon the fresh Derricrane off of the reborn copy of Bullet. Then we will activate Dora's effect, detaching Bullet to get the Therion back before we commit to anything next turn. We'll go for Lancia and draw step, and then our opponent will begin with a copy of Cyberse Gadget. They're going to go for a copy of Devotee into a triggered effect, at which point they're going to trigger the Disciple in order to cycle. Unfortunately, they do get to put that copy of Dasher back, but no big deal. From here, we can go into the Super Express Bullet Train and flip up this copy of Overdrive that we found as well. We're going to summon a Citadel and then wipe their entire board by tributing the Anger Knuckle. Afterwards, we're going to fire off an FD. We have an Ash Blossom, and they are out of gas. They'll pass back to us. At end step, we'll trigger the effect of the Bullet Train to trigger this box, and trigger the box for a copy of Anchor Drill. This is all she wrote, because the first thing we get to do is summon back the King Regulus. We will switch our monsters to attack position and get in for lethal. So we're back with the deck, and it's improved, but it's not that much more explosive than it was previously. Honestly, I don't get the hype. Let's do the pros and cons. First, the pros. 1. Regulus fixes a lot of the deck's weaknesses. In a format where you can't sneeze without spraying a negate, it's nice that even bad decks get one. 2, the deck is so varied. It's a lot like Dragon Link in that there aren't one-card setups, but there are a lot of ways of getting to a whole bunch of different end boards. And 3, you definitely get some free wins off the back of Liba and Friends. And the cons. 1, Regulus is good, but he's not guaranteed. While he's very searchable, oftentimes you need to use your searches on something else. 2, the cards are just a little bit too fair. In a format full of one-card starters in Adventure, Souls, Prankids, and DPE, it's a tall ask to play cards that require others in hand or on field to accomplish anything. And 3, it absorbs a lot of hate that's aimed at other decks. Troll, Nibiru, and the like, eat it alive. All in all, please stop commenting.